Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're very excited to be with you today for the fourth edition of the webinar series on Towards the Engaged University, Policies, Strategies, and Practices. This webinar series is being jointly organized and delivered by Obrial, the organization I represent as the Director of International Projects, and SARUA, the Southern African Regional Universities Association. It is linked to an important project that we have just recently launched collectively on engagement and participatory approaches of universities in the SADC region, funded by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. Today's webinar is focusing on internationalization and capacity building for higher education in local engagement. We have a very exciting program today. We have three speakers coming from very diverse contexts, from Ireland, from Argentina, and also from the SADC region. We will be hearing both about theory and practice and case studies, and we hope that this will contribute to your learning experience and journey. Just a few announcements before we get started and I introduce our chair for today. You will be aware at this point that after each webinar, we offer a reflection quiz. This is an open exercise that allows you to reflect a bit on the content, what you've learned, how you might apply it in your own context. We greatly encourage you to take the time to fill that in. We appreciate those who have been so consistent and studious about filling it in, because it helps us to learn about you and your context. It will be the basis of a short publication that we will be producing on as an outcome of this webinar series. And so please do complete that. Another incentivization to complete that is that if you complete all five questionnaires and have participated in all five webinars, you will be receiving a certificate of completion for this series. Second announcement for you here today. As usual, we engage with you, literally, and we want to engage with you. So please do send your comments to us and your questions in the chat. There is also the Q&A function, which would allow speakers to answer directly to you, but you can use either function. Please do be active. Let us know where you're from and share your questions. And we will be picking out some of the questions and posing them to the panelists throughout the course of the webinar. Another announcement from our side, the last webinar of this series will take place on the 24th of June. We've changed the date to accommodate some of the speakers. We will be also sending a reminder about that. It will be at the same time of day. And we hope that that doesn't pose a problem for any of you. For those of you who cannot make it because of that date change, you can, of course, access the recording as usual. But please note the 24th of June at 4 p.m. CEST time, C-E-S-T, and that will be our final concluding webinar of this series, and we really do hope you'll join us at that time. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my colleague, Kebrom Haile. He is our senior project manager based in Addis Ababa, and also the project lead for the Engage SDG project I mentioned earlier that Obrial is co-implementing with SARUA. Kebrom will be chairing our session today. He will tell you a little bit about the journey we've come on so far, the topics of the past webinars, and he will also introduce our esteemed panel today and engage with them in questions and answers and debate. So Kebrom, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and welcome everyone. As Elizabeth said, my name is Kebrom Haile. I'm based in Addis Ababa, and I'm overall project manager. I would like to welcome all participants and our esteemed speakers to this webinar session. Before diving into the objectives of today's session, I would like to say a few things about the previous sessions. We started this webinar series with a discussion of the concept of the engaged university and what the engaged university and why it is important to discuss this engaged university model in interregional manner. The second session of the webinar focused on how universities can incorporate engagement into their institutional strategy and how they can develop effective institutional monitoring and evaluation systems for engagement. In the third session of the webinar, participants were able to hear speakers from different regions on a topic focused on knowledge production and how higher education or engaged higher education institutions engage in innovation and focusing on the quadruple and quintuple helix models for knowledge production. So today we will focus on internationalization and capacity building for local engagement and see the question of the engaged university and local engagement capacity through the prism of internationalization of higher education. The objectives in general for today's session are to explore how internationalization can support local engagement strategies and compare insights and lessons learned from examples and case studies of how higher education institutions create effective international partnerships from the different regions that are represented today and examine models for institutional capacity building for engagement based on the experience of the higher education institutions in the different regions. Today we have three speakers who have been willing to dedicate their valuable time to this important topic, and we would like to thank them for being here with us. The first speaker will be Professor Chipo Plaxides Mubaya from Chinhoyi University of Technology in Zimbabwe. Prof. Chinhoyi Plaxides Mubaya is currently leading the internationalization and strategic partnerships portfolio for the Chinhoyi University, where she is also an associate professor in the Center for Development Studies. In the former role, Chipo coordinates international student recruitment, national and international partnerships, and student and staff exchange programs for the university. In the latter portfolio, she has been engaged in transdisciplinary research through engagement processes and multi-stakeholder engagement projects. Chipo holds a PhD in development studies from the University of the Free State in South Africa, including an MSc in social ecology from the University of Zimbabwe. Professor Chipo, welcome to this webinar. Our second speaker will be Cleona Maher from University College Cork in Ireland. Cleona Maher is Latin American and Caribbean strategy officer for the University College Cork in Ireland, where she builds and promotes academic cooperation between Ireland and Latin America and the Caribbean. She is also currently president of the Society for Irish Latin American Studies and chairperson of the Latin America Solidarity Center in Ireland. Her research interests include climate action and global justice in Latin America and Caribbean region, embedding global citizenship, community engagement, social responsibility, and the sustainable development goals into higher education. Cleona has also worked as coordinator of international cooperation at Universidad Veracruzana and the Veracruz state government in Mexico for over 25 years, where she was key to the development of international cooperation projects with international organizations engaged in the region. Today, we are grateful to have Cleona amongst us to hear the various, the vast experience they have in conducting community outreach in the different Latin American countries. Thank you. The third speaker we have today is Professor Daniel Antenucci. Professor Daniel Antenucci is a researcher and full professor of physiology and biology at the National University of Mar del Plata, Argentina. He is the director of the Laboratory of Physiological and Behavioral Ecology at the Department of Biology, co-founder and director of the Laboratory for the Internationalization of Education of the National University of Mar de la Plata, president of Land Global Foundation, and director of the Interinstitutional Center for Marine Research of the Ministry of Science and Technology of Argentina, where he also served as advisor of the National Bank of Biological Data and member of the Commission for Centers and Interinstitutional Projects on Strategic Issues. He's co-founder of INLAT, the coordinating body for the internationalization of higher education in Latin America, and a former director of the Argentine Higher Education Fair. From 2017 to 2021, he was vice rector of the university and head of its internationalization department and advisor of the group of universities of Montevideo. Between 2019 and 2021, he led Road to Fiesta, organized with O'Brien and promoted by the European Education Council, consisting of more than 30 Erasmus projects and 200 universities in Europe and Latin America. Finally, he is also active in the field of international education research, lecturing at conferences on international education, on the new instruments of internationalization, the Latin American agenda, the South-South relations in various associations and universities. Professor Antonucci has more than 60 publications in international journals, book chapters, and books. It's quite a long list of achievements to list. I have left out some. I hope Prof. Antonucci will not mind. So I would like to welcome all speakers, and we thank you all for giving your valuable time to this webinar. And I open the floor to Professor Mubaya from Chinhoyi University, Zimbabwe, to make the first speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen now. I hope you can all see my screen.
Yeah, it's coming, but
it's coming.
It's coming, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm going to take you through my presentation, which will focus on the questions that were shown just a little bit earlier, but focusing on Southern African Development Community. So it's going to be a brief presentation, and I'll start by showing you the outline of my presentation.
Prof, can you reshare your screen? It seems stuck. Yeah.
Okay. Can you
Great.
see it now?
Yeah.
Great. So this is the outline of my presentation. I will start by reflecting on current trends in internationalization of higher education, and then give a conceptualization of this in the context of community engagement. Then I will reflect on the two questions. First, how can internationalization support local engagement strategies, and how can universities partner effectively? And I'll give a case study from Mozambique in Southern Africa of community engagement and internationalization, and give lessons and insights from that case study before I conclude. So just to reflect on the current trends, where universities within this region are operating under a highly complex and rapidly changing external environment that is characterized by competition, cooperation, of course, as well, but focusing on economic and financial instability, where these institutions are facing a shrinking funding base due to macroeconomic conditions, nationally, internationally as well, and also looking at considerations for internationalization within these institutions. What is the rationale behind internationalization, where some of them focus on status and prestige in terms of placing themselves at a certain level, and while others also focus on the academic aspects, how can they improve their academic environment, their curriculum, taking advantage of internationalization, looking at the economic aspect of internationalization, focusing on revenue generation, increasing income through perhaps student recruitment, international student recruitment, but also more recently taking into account the socio-cultural aspect as well, where internationalization actually considers improvement in staff, students, the wider community as well. And when we talk about community engagement within this context, we are looking at governments, we are looking at civil society organizations, business stakeholders, and the citizens themselves. And a few considerations in terms of the people themselves. How can people network within this context? Membership issues, considering international organizations, how universities can leverage these organizations to improve on their international ranking and join a growing community of practice. But what is more critical is to consider the structures. Once internationalization is in place, what are the structures and functions for operations, and who are the leaders, what positions are needed within the institution, and whether these are centralized or devolved. So within this current trends, we are looking at, I've already talked about insufficient funding, but also the issue of considering numbers in the quantitative aspect in terms of how many students. Some of them universities are looking at how many students they have, how much are they bringing in, as opposed to considering the qualitative aspect of internationalization as well, which is also quite critical. Looking at new areas of development and how these are influencing internationalization. For example, we are looking at internationalization of curriculum, but also looking at the digital learning aspect as well. So all these trends are really important when considering community engagement within this contextualization. But then it's important for us to understand how internationalization has been evolving, starting from a consideration of this being a process of integrating international, intercultural, and a global dimension into the functions of delivery of post-secondary education. And this is a definition that has been defined and recast to consider broader aspects. The aspect of this being intentional. So it's a planned process rather than being ad hoc. Internationalization to be a planned process of integrating these aspects that I have highlighted, but also adding to that the aspect of ensuring that there is meaningful contribution to society. And this is where we then begin to talk about the engaged university and making contribution to our communities in their various forms, as I have highlighted them. And this just summarizes what I've been talking about in terms of the initial consideration of internationalization as a goal rather than as a process as it has emerged, and an over-focus on the quantitative outputs, the economic aspects, with a narrow focus on institutional community as opposed to the wider and broader community, and aligning the international dimension with social responsibility. Which also brings on board the issue of internationalization at home to deal with the issue of funding, where there are funding constraints. Internationalization at home then becomes key, and internationalization of curriculum, as I have already indicated. So now we're beginning to see in the contemporary perspectives, a broader definition and conceptualization of internationalization. And this then leads me into talking about how can internationalization within this context, the conceptualization that I've given, how can it support local engagement strategies? And I highlight here 3 key areas. The first one is the issue of leadership commitment. And this is in terms of how important it is for universities, institutions to target resource mobilization, particularly for internationalization, and looking at involving the international community through many ways, benchmarking, for example, to enrich quality. At the end of the day, as I've mentioned, it's a process of ensuring that there's educational service which is of good quality to the general community, and also ensuring that there is that commitment in leadership to come up and make a clear and come up with a clear agenda towards internationalization and community engagement. Ensure that there is that internationalization policy which brings this on board and establishes partnerships and collaborative networks, and to ensure that the strategies and plans within the institution take these on board. But of course, commitment to also engage the alumni, for example, within universities, which can help by engaging, ensuring that these institutions reach out to industry and other partners as well. And the sense of ownership must also be there in terms of local strategies to ensure that the stakeholders that we are talking about, the communities that we are talking about, are considered in terms of their knowledge, their ideas and views are taken on board. They're part of the community, and the research that comes about, for example, research project initiatives that we have that internationalization aspect, actually consider the transdisciplinary aspect that considers co-production, co-generation of knowledge, ensuring that all sources of knowledge important, including grassroots knowledge as well. So this is the strategic thinking around how these institutions and universities can actually reach out to the wider community, and ensuring that they leverage international grants and resources and expertise as well for the good of the general community. And then in terms of how can we partner internationally effectively as universities, as institutions within these institutions of learning, I show here a case study by Thompson and others, which particularly focus on Luria University, which is in Mozambique. Mozambique is one of the countries in SADC, in Southern Africa. And this is a consortium that was developed around an international grant. So the consortium has 5 countries and institutions, new universities that are focusing on medicine, medical schools that have been set up, coming together, developing a consortium that is also partnering with the North, with a university in the US, another one from Finland, and where they have a program which is called a One Student, One Family program, which is compulsory for all the students in the medical field with different medical specialties, focusing particularly engaging local families and local communities, and taking advantage of grassroots knowledge within this medical field, the different specialties, community health knowledge, and with the Luria University at the center, considering trans-professional knowledge from the different specialties and international health knowledge for these students, and managing this consortium and bringing on board expertise from the international community to focus particularly on pedagogic knowledge, but engagement knowledge as well for these communities, and taking advantage of this expertise of the funding that also comes with this project, creating a network and managing this project, and ensuring that this partnership is used for the general the benefits of the communities. And from this project, which I've just summarized, there are a few lessons that have come up and that can be used not only by this consortium, but also by others going forward in terms of leveraging on internationalization partnerships for community engagement. And there are 4 key areas that come to the fore, and the funding issue is one of them, where they have realized that it's important to consider the funding that is coming with the grant as seed funding, rather than funding that should sustain the project beyond even up to the end of the project, but to ensure that they bring on board funding mechanisms, mobilization mechanisms for resources as alternative sources of funding to sustain the project, even when the set funding comes to an end. And to ensure that within the funding aspects, they overcome imbalances in terms of resources. But what has also been key is the issue of monitoring and evaluation within this context, where cultural differences from this network are considered. Weak research capacity is also considered, and that aspect of continuous monitoring and coming up with these weaknesses that need to be addressed as an iterative process as the project goes on are really focused on, and that there is capacity to deliver on each of the developed partnerships and ensuring that these partnerships are not just partnerships on paper, but these are partnerships that are really organic, and they actually integrate a learning cycle for all stakeholders within the universities, but also outside the universities, to ensure that there's that transdisciplinary aspect. The citizens themselves are considered and working with them rather than being extractive when they consider these. So it's a journey that monitoring and evaluation has really helped to actually refocus the project and also modify whatever needs to be modified. And within this context as well, the issue of local communities' involvement, ensuring that customs and lived realities on the part of the local and the grassroots are taken on board, as they've taken note of Chamber's assertion that these communities are actually experts themselves rather than universities having experts coming into the communities. And that learning is actually bi-directional from the communities to these disciplinary communities as well, but also vice versa, and ensuring that there is that experiential education on the part of the medical students. And also the last point here is on the multi-institutional consortia, with the realization that for these consortia to actually sustain themselves, it's important to ensure that universities are full members of consortia rather than having individuals as expert, as focal persons, as sometimes they leave and that turnover can actually destabilize the consortia. So this has been a realization that has really helped on the project, and also ensuring that the aspect of community engagement through internationalization is part of the strategic plan, and partnerships are really complementing each other rather than competing. So these are some of the lessons that have been learned, but within this context, it's important to also take into consideration some of the challenges that have been faced on the project, as these really helped as well to strengthen realization of these challenges and trying to address them. Also helped quite a lot in terms of ensuring that they are effective partnerships, by understanding that there was a shortage of tutors that they needed to address, and given them the multidisciplinary aspect of the partnership, the difficulties of scheduling given the diversity of stakeholders who have sometimes competing interests of many other interests, and who have to set aside time for the project, and trying to work around that, and also trying to work around the negative attitude of students who sometimes just think that coming to the university is about them getting into the lecture room, coming out, doing their practicals, but with having then to engage communities considering that as an extra effort that they may not want really to get into, and trying to deal with that and reorienting the students' attitudes and faculty's familiarity with teaching in this kind of program. For some of this faculty, this was a first for them, and having to navigate around some of these challenges was really important, as well as time, setting aside time, and also ensuring that logistics was really up to scratch for the project. So I'll stop here for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Mubaya. It was a very informative presentation and very interesting case study to elaborate on more as we go on. So I invite participants to forward their questions to our speaker. Please use the Q&A feature if you have any questions on the first presentation. As we wait for questions from participants, it's a very interesting case study that you presented, Prof. Mwaya, and it addresses one of the major concerns in relation to internationalization and community engagement, especially from the Global South. It's interesting that you mentioned both in the consortia as well as in the monitoring and evaluation, partners in this international partnership were equal partners, and it was entered into on a clearly agreed basis. So the concern usually is there is imbalance between partnership in case of internationalization with institutions from Global South and Global North. So how did you manage to achieve that, and how important do you think is that going forward for universities in the Global South to do to ensure equal partnership in these engagements? Prof. Mwaya, can you hear me?
Sorry, Kibromi, I lost you for a while there. Sorry about that. Your question was on balancing, perceptions, did you say, from the North and South in the partnership?
Yes, creating that equal partnership and how important it is to emphasize on that.
Oh, okay. Yes, actually, if I mentioned the issue of balancing resources, which was very critical to ensure that there is that equal partnership that you're talking about, in terms of ensuring that there is that balance that is being created in terms of resources, be it in terms of providing funding for the different partners. I mentioned that there were partners from the South in 5 different countries, but also one partner from Finland, another one in the US. So that aspect, particularly on balancing resources, was very critical. But also, I think what also comes here is the issue of perceptions as well, and attitudes, which is very, because this is the transdisciplinary aspect is emerging, something that is not very, very new, but fairly new. And perceptions, having a multidisciplinary partnership may not always be easy, with some coming from the hard sciences, for example, and soft sciences, and perceptions differ. A way of doing things also differs in terms of research, how they do research, rigor, perceptions of rigor, and all that. So that understanding, that orientation aspect was, from my understanding, was also very key on the part of the project for them to have that balance, which was really needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have a question in the chat. One question says, for many African universities which are experiencing financial crisis due to underfunding, amongst other causes, can internationalization be a priority to them? Can you relate this question as well with the fact that in the case studies that you managed to sustain the project in addition to the seed money, and how that was achieved, and how can it be achieved in situations where the question refers to underfunding in African universities?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Please read the question.
Yeah, the question essentially is about the situation in African universities where there is they're underfunded, and if in such situation internationalization can be a priority to such universities?
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, in fact, that's very correct to talk about underfunding in African universities. So because of this, the underfunding, a lot of universities within the region actually do end up not setting aside funds for internationalization, and a lot of institutions have to look for funding themselves, maybe through grants, looking for grants, but also, and that's why a lot of these universities also end up focusing on the economic aspect, looking at, chasing numbers, trying to have as many international students as possible so that they can get revenue for the universities. But now, more, if you look at the different countries, we are beginning to see some attention being given to funding for specific efforts towards internationalization. For example, in Zimbabwe, now we have specific efforts that have come up at national level by government to actually begin to address internationalization, setting aside funds, coming up with programs around internationalization. For example, they've come up with a study in Zimbabwe program, which is actually funded. And so these are some of the examples where we are beginning to see at national level commitment for towards internationalization, and this cascading down with expectations from national level to universities to actually set aside funds, have specific and targeted efforts towards internationalization. So it's not really easy, but there are steps towards that in a number of African countries in the region.
Okay, thank you. We are competing with time, but just as an experience, how did you manage to cope with the challenges? For example, the shortage of facilitators, and how did you manage to address that challenge? If you could briefly address this question, and we will proceed with the second speaker.
Okay, so because the project had provision for experts coming from outside different countries. For example, if there is a shortage of facilitators in Namibia, then some of the facilitators could then come from the partner countries in the north, or even partner countries from within the region. So that always ended up happening, and this really helped on the project. But that aspect of having this internationalization project also helped in building the capacity within specific institutions so that the number of experts is increased. So this was the whole idea behind the project in the first place, on capacity building.
Okay, Prof. Mwea, thank you very much for addressing the questions, and there are some other questions that we will come back to in the panel discussion part of the session. So our second speaker is Cleona Maher from University College Cork. Please.
Good afternoon. Good morning, wherever you are. Delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'll just share my screen as well. So I'm based in University College Cork in Ireland, and I'm the International Strategy Officer for Latin America and the Caribbean. We're based in the heart of the city of Cork, which is the second largest city in Ireland. It's a small city, I suppose, on a world stage, but it's a cosmopolitan, vibrant European port city, and it's actually the second largest natural harbour in the world. It's also a UNESCO Learning City since 2015, and it has been denominated European Capital of Culture. It's a vibrant place with many festivals, music, food, cinema, throughout the year. It's also home to more than 170 multinational companies who have their European base in Cork. And it's quite a hub for industry in food, renewable energies, ICT, and biomedical. And in the city, we have an increasing Latin American communities, Brazilian, Chilean, Mexican, which are essential and we're working with for internationalization at home. Just a little bit of the size of the university, we're just around 24,000 students. And we have about 3,200 academic research admin staff. And we have a new strategic plan called Securing Our Future, which came into operation last year, which puts global engagement at the center and as one of our 5 strategic goals, along with research and innovation, student success, staff and culture, and our place and our footprint. And also our research has been recently reorganized into 10 key areas around UCC Futures, including sustainability, humanities, food, microbiome, and health, to name a few. And UCC, I suppose one of the greatest assets are our green credentials. We have a strong focus on sustainability that's student-led, research-informed, and practice-focused. And we have a sustainability and climate action plan, a vice presidency of climate action and sustainability. And also recently, we also have a new vice presidency of global engagement. And we're developing a new global engagement plan. UCC is also home to the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which covers all of the island of Ireland. And we partner with Ábhairdial and Sarua, who have co-organized this great webinar series. And we're also involved in 2 important projects, Engage SDG and CLIMAR. UCC, in terms of global engagement, our new plan is, including things like our global impact in the world and focusing on SDGs in the global south, and also prioritizing global citizenship, internationalization at home, internationalization of the curriculum, whether it be formal or non-formal, and community engagement of the global at UCC for our community in UCC and also the wider community of Cork and the region. So my remit is coordinating cooperation with Latin America and the Caribbean. A lot of the work we do is framed around the current Sustainable Development Goals. We work on areas like food security, plant and food science, migration policies, gender violence, environmental law, peace processes, climate change and circular economy, to name but a few. And we work with partners such as governments in the food security area in Chile and Colombia. We also work with organizations like Ábhairdial, the Talwar Network, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network worldwide. We're also part of a European alliance of universities called UNIQUE with 9 other European universities. And we also work with organizations like SILAS, the Society of Irish Latin American Studies, the EU LAC Foundation, and local communities in Cork, like the Mexican community, our Hispanic Society on campus, and also local or national non-governmental organizations who would be working towards similar missions like GOAL, LASK, etc. So just to give you a few examples of a few case studies with Honduras, Yency Flores is a Honduran member of staff. She came to us initially through an Erasmus Mundus project called Amadilla to do a master's in molecular biology. As part of her master's program, together with an Irish student, they developed a low-cost, fast diagnostic tool for tropical diseases in Honduras that won a $50,000 seed funding with Rebel Bio to start up a company. The company, now called GlowDX, is one of the best biotech companies in Latin America, doing amazing work in the health space. But Yency herself then went on to secure Irish Research Council funding to do a PhD in synthetic biology. And during her PhD, her team moved lab and left some equipment that was unused. So together with UCC and an Irish company who ship fruit from Central America to Europe, we managed to equip the first biotech lab in Honduras with Yency, and then we secured some small funding through the European Union to actually do a capacity building project in synthetic biology in Honduras, where 25 Honduran biology professors and government agency officials were trained in the use of synthetic biology. So this has kind of was an amazing experience for UCC and the National University in Honduras as an internationalization at home. The lab in UCC, you know, had adopted a lot of Hondurans over the course of 2 years, and then a whole team from the lab spent 2 weeks in Honduras doing an intensive training. So it was a real opportunity, not only for internationalization at home, but for the building of global citizenship, where the UCC researchers really got to work with real world problems, you know, that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. Another case study is our work with the Colombian Department of Foreign Affairs. They have an amazing program where they foster traditional music and sports with children in post-conflict areas. So UCC signed up to be, I suppose, the first host of a group of young female harpists who came to Cork, and we worked with our UNESCO city partners and music festivals where the girls got to perform both on campus and in a public library, and the teachers got to be part of the music festival. This was also an amazing, I suppose, internationalization at home, not only for the university, but for Cork City. Everybody in Cork, I think, learned a bit about Colombia that week. And obviously the Colombian participants involved have, you know, an amazing life experience, and the harp was kind of a thing of interest in both of our cultures. Also with Colombia, we've been working on how to best embed the SDGs, not only into higher education, but into community engagement. We've been co-producing summer schools, both in Colombia and Ireland, and we've been working with local actors, you know, on best practices to make green transitions. And together we won some EU LAC Foundation funding to actually run a workshop in San Andres in Colombia with participatory methods on how to work with local actors for sustainability and green transition. With Mexico, we've done a lot of work on migration policies, refugees. We co-produced a summer school in migration as well with Universidad Veracruzana in Mexico, and a team from Ireland actually representing the Mexican community in Cork raised some money and donated very much needed, I suppose, food supplies to Las Patronas, which is an amazing NGO based in the state of Veracruz. Together with Veracruzana, we also participated on some Talwar Network initiatives. We've both won the Global Citizenship Award for student-led projects. And UCC hosts the only Irish Centre for Mexican Studies, which works on a lot of issues around gender violence. And together we've been looking at using cinema, literature, and arts, you know, working with film festivals locally on how we can, I suppose, bring these topics not only within the UCC community, but to the broader Cork community. And we've had PhD students who've been funded by the Irish Research Council and CONACYT in Mexico on these topics. And then finally, just an example of some other community engagement projects with partners through our unique university alliance. Together with the Universidad de Deusto, we applied for some seed funding to look at the use of cinema for different, I suppose, global citizenship awareness. They have a great film festival in Bilbao called Cine Invisible, which, you know, includes not only Latin American issues, but worldwide issues. And we're looking at bringing some of that to Cork. Also, a Colombian migrant film festival, together with LASC, which is the Latin American Solidarity Center, an NGO based nationwide in Ireland. And this week, actually, LASK are celebrating Latin American Week. So together with them, we had 2 events on campus. One was a salsa class, and another was a talk on Roger Casement's legacy and the situation of extractive industry today in the world. And finally, Sfera, which is a very interesting project that combines the use of online engagement and having students from all around Latin America, Spain, Portugal, and a team in UCC on looking at how you can create, I suppose, some impact locally on a global, using a global solution to a problem. So a team from UCC of Latin American students looked at what Latin American coffee people are consuming in Cork, how much they know about it, was the project that we had last year. But it's just a good example of how you can do stuff online and, I suppose, create a local impact with local partners here. So I'll leave it at that. And thanks for your time.
Thank you, Cleoda. It's a lot to take in, a lot of examples and case studies to learn from. Again, as we wait for questions from participants, just as a lesson for those of us in the Global South and also from the practice, in all these activities, what are the major takeaways that you'd like to give? Of course, it's understandably difficult to detail out the experience in all these different projects, but core takeaways, how to make these partnerships work better, how to overcome challenges, if any, that you may have faced in pursuing these partnerships.
I suppose the main takeaways, would be, our learning is that there's a lot of opportunity for building global citizenship through internationalization at home with the international community you have on campus or in the city. And I suppose a challenge sometimes is a lot of that is kind of extracurricular, or it's kind of things that are done, I suppose, outside the formal curriculum. I think a challenge and a welcome opportunity would be to see how we could build these activities into formal curriculum. For example, the Sfera project, where I had a team of students working for a semester on this coffee project. In the case of Cork, it's an extracurricular, activity where they have to put in 5 hours a week, on top of what they're doing, and they don't get credits for it. So at the moment, we're trying to make that project as a 5 European, credit module. But I think there is a lot of good practice where film, like using documentary to create conversations and using them as part of masters and various master's programs that they could fit into, and integrating them into formal curriculum, and I suppose widening them out to the general public as well is important to enrich the discussion. I suppose in Cork, in one way, we're fortunate that we have a very diverse community, and increasingly so. But at the same time, Ireland is a small island, off the northwest of Europe, where most of the students may not really have, been exposed to real life, projects in Honduras or Africa. So it's kind of trying to also foster more outward mobility when possible, but using, I think there's a lot more we could do with information technologies and COILs and virtual interactions online.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have in the chat, Elizabeth says, excellent for the presentation. And do you feel that the whole university community has ownership of this global engagement, and what's done from leadership level to foster this ownership?
That's actually a really good question and very pertinent for what is happening at the moment. So we have a new vice president for global engagement, and we're developing a new global engagement strategy. So currently there have been many, I suppose, physical and online forums, an opportunity for people to give feedback on the draft plan. People can, write individually, and the plan will be approved or submitted to academic board at the end of the summer. So there's an ongoing process at the moment of asking everybody and giving them a good, different opportunities to feed in to what they think is important for global. There was a survey done as well, and these concepts actually came up about SDGs in the Global South, global citizenship, refugees, sanctuary. We're a university of sanctuary as well for refugees. So it was, it was very interesting to see what what students and staff think should be part of our global engagement plan.
Thank you, Cleona. One asks, what kinds of strategies do you often use to pool human and financial resources to support these activities?
So for human resources, I suppose a lot of it is based on goodwill of, international students and staff, and local communities like the Brazilian community or the Mexican community. Funding is always a challenge, but for example, with the Unique University Alliance, there was opportunities for small seed funding. Obviously, the European Commission calls with Obreal has been very important in building projects like CLIMAR or Engage SDG, which are very relevant to UCC's mission and hope for our global impact and global engagement in the world. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of partnering with others and consortia to try and harness funding, whether it be the large capacity building in higher education or small international credit mobility or other seed funding. For example, also with NGOs like LASK, the Latin American Solidarity Center, they're funded through Irish Aid. So together with them, we were able to pay, for example, a Colombian salsa dance teacher to do a salsa class open to the entire community this week. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. More broadly, let me add one question in the spirit of the interregional discussion. And Norbert asks, what is a green transition about? But in more broadly, how can African universities benefit from this kind of partnerships and engagement?
So green transition, I suppose it's about trying to improve our practices. I mean, in UCC, for example, it's always developing. 2 years ago, we managed to go zero waste in terms of, no plastic bottles are sold on campus, no disposable cups, right down to where sustainability is. We have an SDG mapping tool, actually, which I can put in the chat and everybody's, willing to use, which can be used by academics, but it can also be used in research on trying to map your discipline and your work, even as an administrative, function, to the SDGs. But yeah, I mean, the CLIMAR project, which I know Danielle is going to talk about, is, an interesting example. We work with, local, I suppose, initiatives in the city. One is like in food autonomy, food security, local food providers in the city. We would invite them onto campus to share their experience, maybe improve, the vegan, vegetarian, non-meat menus we have, the local suppliers in the canteen. So one thing we do, like in UCC, is the food available on campus comes from local farms that ideally are not more than 5 kilometers from campus. So every week we'd say, okay, our dairy produce came from here, our fish came from here, and try and, I suppose, work with good practices locally. if I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I can put a few links in the chat as well.
Okay. How about the question about the possibility of having African universities in similar partnerships?
No, I mean, UCC have a really robust history of working with African universities. We have a master's program in sustainable development for the agri sector and cooperatives that was initially funded by the European Union on a program called Agris Mundus, where we've had a lot of African universities participate on and African students. And I know there's ongoing research in that. So in the food security area, I know that's a big potential, but I can put my email as well, and I'm happy to link in any African universities interested in the different projects we have. I think there's great potential though. And there's a great history of Ireland working with Africa. We have many embassies and Irish Aid missions in Africa. So I think, yeah, it's a very productive partnership, Ireland-Africa.
Okay, thank you, Cleona. We have still coming some questions, but I'll reserve them for the panel discussion so that all the speakers can reflect on them. Mainly, those are on how to form partnerships and so on. Thank you, Cleona, again. Prof. Daniel?
Yeah, I will share the presentation in a minute. Well, good morning. It is an honor to speak with you today on the topic of internationalization and capacity building for higher education, local engagement. This subject is increasingly vital as we strive to create globally interconnected education system that foster local development and engagement. Today, I will discuss how internationalization enhances the capacity of higher education institution to engage with their local community effectively. And I will share insights from the Erasmus Plus Climate Project as a concrete example of this dynamic interplay. Well, the concept of an engaged university emphasizes the role of higher education institution as active contributor to their local communities. Engagement goes beyond traditional teaching and research. It involves a proactive approach to addressing societal challenges and fostering sustainable development. Internationalization in this context serves as a catalyst, bringing in diverse perspectives, fostering cross-cultural collaboration, and enhancing the institution's ability to respond to local needs with innovative solutions. What is the internationalization as a catalyst? Internationalization in higher education involves integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, function, and delivery of post-secondary education. This process not only broadens the horizon of students and faculty, but also equips institutions with the tools to address global challenge locally. Through partnership, collaborative research, and mobility programs, university can leverage international expertise to tackle issues pertinent to their local context. I will present the case study called Erasmus Plus CLIMAR project. So allow me to illustrate this with an example from the Erasmus Plus CLIMAR project, which aims to strengthen research, innovation, and knowledge transfer on climate change and tourism in Latin America, higher education institutions. This project exemplifies how international collaboration can enhance local engagement and capacity building. I will talk about CLIMAR project overview. The CLIMAR project brings together universities and educational consortia from Europe and Latin America to address the interlinked challenges of climate change and tourism. By fostering multidisciplinary research groups and promoting collaborative teaching, the project aims to develop sustainable tourism practices that mitigate the impacts of climate change in general and in each city where the partnership institutions are located. This initiative not only enhances the academic and research capacity of the participating institution, but also has tangible benefits for the local community involved. Now I will present some examples of how CLIMAR project promote the collaborative teaching and multidisciplinary research on climate change and sustainable for the partner institution. The project includes training program designed to improve the skill of local researchers, professors, and faculty members in climate change and tourism. The CLIMAR project includes workshops on climate data analysis, sustainable tourism practices, and policy development. In 2023 and 2024, different training seminars were held in Argentina, Colombia, Italy, and Ireland, and will also be held in Mexico and Panama during the coming month of July and November. Finally, with the skills acquired, researcher, professor, and faculty member will create courses on sustainable tourism for universities, graduates, and postgraduates, as well as social and tourist stakeholders. Now I will share a South America example given during CLIMAR seminar in Colombia. In Colombia, one of the seminars presented by PhD Gabriela Arrieta was on circular economy, regenerative tourism and sanitation in Latin America, specifically in Colombia. She raised the question of whether tourism is really sustainable or whether it puts pressure on service delivery capacity in developing countries. She describes the sanitation situation in the world and in Latin America, where millions still lack access to adequate services, especially in rural areas. In Colombia, 12% do not have access to basic sanitation, and the rural-urban gap is really high. She then focused her lecture on rural sanitation, where precarious individual solutions predominate. She compared indicators into the red region, showing territorial inequalities, and presented statistics on rural dealing with sanitation deficits by department. She raises the tension between growing rural tourism and lagging sanitation, illustrated with news on water pollution in the tourism destination. Finally, she described a case study of sanitation diagnosis in rural tourism areas and possible low-cost sustainable solutions. Another example from South America that was given during a climate seminar in Cork. Similarly, in Ireland, the Climate Project facilitated a training course developed by invited researchers. One example was the presentation of Jesus Olivero on scientific tourism. He presented an experiences in new scientific tourism venture that he is carrying out in the city of Cartagena de Indias. The objective of the project is to provide the tourist population with an offer of guided visit to space and laboratories related to formal science, where researchers and scientific personnel describes and show the procedures they carry out during the research work. For example, the presence of heavy metal in sludge on the one hand, or the molecular biodiversity of certain plant on the other. This molecular diversity presents a diverse and rich panorama in terms of biomolecules with curative or regenerative capacities. In the same sense, it gives value to aspects that have to do with evidence of contamination, key biological species linked to health, and its potential for raising awareness of carrying out environmentally friendly tourist activities. The content provides novel perspective for the range of offer linked to sustainable tourism. Well, I will talk now about the impact on local engagement. So the example from Colombia and Ireland that could be extrapolated to the region where other partnerships are placed demonstrate how internationalization through projects like Climate can significantly enhance local engagement by bringing together diverse expertise, perspectives, and fostering collaborative learning. This initiative empowers local institutions to address pressing issues more effectively. Moreover, the integration of international perspective into local context helps create more holistic and sustainable solution. The capacity building through the internationalization in higher education involves developing the skill, knowledge, and research necessary to achieve sustainable development goals. Internationalization plays a crucial role in the process by facilitating the exchange of best practices, innovative methodology, and cutting-edge research. Through partnership and mobility programs, universities can build their capacity to engage with local communities in meaningful ways, ultimately contributing to the social and economic development. Well, excuse me. In conclusion, the intersection of internationalization and local engagement in higher education offers a powerful framework for addressing global challenges while fostering local development. the Erasmus Plus Climate Project is a testament to how international collaboration can enhance the capacity of higher education institutions to engage with their community effectively. By continuing to promote international partnership and collaborative initiative, we can ensure that our universities remain dynamic, engaged, and capable of driving positive change locally and globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Antonucci. Dear participants, you can now forward your questions for Daniel. As we wait for questions from participants, maybe related with some of the questions already raised in the previous session, how do you perceive, or how do you form these partnerships in your context, and who pursues the partnership? Does it come from the Argentinian side, or from the partners from the other regions? Can you hear me, Daniel?
Excuse me, how do you, we form this partnership in what sense? In the content, we create through Climate Project a content for under and
Can you hear me?
postgraduate careers. With this content, we form the partnership or the capacities of the university to form graduate with an perspective of climate change and sustainability. So in this context, we prepare the professional and stakeholder for a sustainable future in the world that is true necessary to fight against the climate change and our culture about that. Especially with new content on this perspective of sustainability, especially in tourism, that there is one of the main factors that contribute to the climate change and the effect on climate change on our countries and our cities with a fluent quantity of income tourists and people in our regions, with practices that are not very related, or the practices that don't fight against the climate change in general.
Thank you. We have another question about the engagement of the local community and how were they motivated to
I don't hear
the collaborative project, and how did you manage it?
Your voice was cutting, so I don't understand very well.
Oh,
What do you say? Could you repeat?
okay. Okay, yes. How were the local community motivated to participate in the project? Still? Oh, maybe my network has a problem.
Yeah. We motivate to the community with communication on the social community, industry, and stakeholder. We carry out surveys to take or know the perspective of the people, of the common people in the social media, to construct content, to do courses, including that perspective for change your view about the sustainability, and also including in programs in the university or educate or super education content for the student, common student, undergraduate student. We expect to construct or build a culture about that, the sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Now I will use this opportunity to invite all three speakers, probably to reflect on some general questions briefly. We are running out of time. So in terms of creating these partnerships, how do you, or what do you recommend one special universities from the Global South to do to create these partnerships, and how to ensure their sustainability?
Well,
If you like, I could answer. I think for a successful partnership, there should be like a win-win. So, you know, that both partners are benefiting from the project together. So if it's, you know, an NGO, a non-governmental organization, and a university, that there would be a mutual benefit, that they share the same interest, mission, and, you know, it's, for example, maybe the NGO, it's an opportunity to find new volunteers, new employees that would work with them on other projects, and for the university, a way to enrich curriculum, formal and non-formal, with, you know, real world issues, for example, in the case of UCC.
Okay.
I could also weigh in on that, Kipromi. I think in terms of somebody was asking on how they can be part of partnerships. I think it's important, particularly for those in the South, to be deliberate about this, make deliberate efforts to join networks, because it's from these networks that partnerships arise, or partnership opportunities. You get to know about partnership opportunities within the networks. So it's really critical that perhaps it's important to make sure that you are intentional. It's not always easy, but once you've joined 1, 2, 3 networks, then those networks also lead to other networks as well, and you end up with a web of that. So I think it's really important to make sure that you are part of some of these networks that are within your field of specialization. Thank you.
I think that it's very different, our position regarding the problems and the perspective in the Global South in relation to with the Global North. We search for partner, looking for partner in the North, because financial support is very poor in the South, and we have very different perspectives and problematics. So it's very important to bring to the North examples of our own problems that are very, very different in development respect and to global north. So I think that these kind of networks are I have say Cliona win-win in the sense of for the global south to improve the financial support, improve the development in areas that are very, very problematic, and for the global north to know the hard problem of the global south.
Thank you. Related to one question that was raised earlier in the chat, but broadly speaking, in the literature, there has been a debate about or treating internationalization and community development as two separate activities or goals to pursue by higher education institutions, as though there is a competition or tension between serving locally and also pursuing internationalization, especially in terms of image building and competition at the global stage. From the cases that we have seen, I think that's not the case, but can you say more about how that assumption or that argument can be wrong? And in fact, internationalization can be a source of capacity for local engagement. Because one of the questions raised earlier was, should universities focus on internationalization when they don't have fund? But from the practice, as we see, it is also a way of bringing capacity and fund to achieve local engagement. So how do you reflect on that debate?
On internationalization and community engagement, definitely I think community engagement can enrich internationalization, at home, on campus. And in terms of funding, I wouldn't see community engagement as a source of, funding internationalization, but I suppose going back to the win-win, if there is resources that we can harness together, through calls, where you can have universities working with NGOs, working with private sector, public sector, to address specific local issues. I think, working together, could harness funding that will serve both community engagement and internationalization together. But yeah, they are things, I think that there's more to be explored. It's probably a new area. In universities, traditionally, the community engagement department would be separate to the internationalization department. And, it's sometimes seen as quite novel, trying to get it to cross over. In Cork, the city being a UNESCO learning city, we have been looking at ways of working together with the city in terms of integration of, new migrant growing communities, and, coupling that with our international cohorts. Like we had some students developing a kind of a city map of, for example, Asian students when they first arrive, where can they buy Asian food? What do they need to know? Latin American students as well, just practical things, because often, people will feel more at home in a new university in a new city when they've met their local community who have amazing resources to share because they've been there for 10 or 15 years and there's a good network behind them. So in the case of UCC and the Mexican community, we've worked very well together for many years, and we're developing and following those with with other, the Indian community, the Nigerian community, etc.
Okay. Anyone additional comment from other speakers? If not, probably based on a question received in the chat, but generally speaking, again, in terms of balancing the relation, on what basis do we determine the terms of our collaboration or engagement? Who decides or how is the thematic areas for intervention decided in these different partnerships? Or who should have a say?
I think ideally it would be good to ensure that the many partners involved have some kind of say. But from my experience, this kind of projects on internationalization and community engagement the themes tend to be determined or influenced by the funder in a number of cases, where if researchers are responding to a call, then sometimes these calls tend to have themes or areas that they are focusing on, and this kind of gives direction to the partnership in terms of what areas they can focus on, maybe more broadly. But when it comes to then sitting down together to come up with the themes, then usually it's the different stakeholders have a different part to play, but they do sit more and more now. We are beginning to see partnerships, people sitting together and agreeing on what themes to follow in response to a particular call. So I think we are getting there in terms of having that equal representation of thoughts, representation of ideas in partnerships, where even researchers from the South in this region are able to actually contribute to the outcome in terms of coming up with themes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comment? If not, Cleona, Daniel, no? Okay. So thank you for this very, of course, we cannot finish the discussions here. It has to continue, it will continue. But thank you very much for this exciting and informative session. We have, I hope, learned a lot, both in terms of creating partnership, how these partnerships and collaborations work, and how they can impact both at the local and global level from the different presentations. So I thank all participants for taking an active role in the discussion, and most importantly, I thank all the speakers for dedicating your time, your resource, and your experience to have this wonderful engagement with on the topic. So thank you very much. On next steps, please, participants, remember to respond to the review quizzes that will be available after the end of the session. Also, please remember that you will need to go back and fill the review questions for the first 3 sessions if you have not done yet. And the option to fill the review questions will be open until 1 week after the final session. So to qualify for the certificate to be issued at the end, please remember that you have to fulfill or fill all the 5 quiz questions. The next date for the final session is the 24th of June. I hope we will see you there. Thank you, and have a nice weekend. Elizabeth, this is my last remark. Please say a few words.
Thanks, Kibrom. No, I think you've said it all. I regret we have to cut it because I see there's also some really interesting contributions now still coming into the chat. about engagement in the region, the East African community, about advice and tips for very young universities who want to be more internationally engaged. Please do share those thoughts and those experiences in the quiz that we'll be sharing with you shortly, because we would like to capture that, bring it into further and future discussions, and also capture it in the final report we mentioned that we will be publishing. So thank you, everyone. On behalf of Aubrial, this is a real pleasure. Thank you to the panelists. Excellent. This is really the heart of Aubrial's mission, universities for engagement and interregional collaboration for development in a South-South-North perspective. So I think we've touched on all of those issues in this webinar today, and in that sense, it's been extremely pertinent. Thank you, everyone. The video will be available. Share it with your colleagues who weren't able to be with us today. And once again, please do fill in that quiz when you receive it. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Clina. Wonderful. Thank you, Danielle. Thanks, Prof. Chipo.
Thank you. Goodbye.